I love it when that rare book comes along that basically has you walking on air when you're done. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today guys, we are doing a book review. But before we get into that, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, as it does help the channel grow. And you can check the description box down below for links to the social media, including Discord and Patreon, if you want to help support what I do here. It's always greatly appreciated. And guys, today we're here to talk about a very special book that I have right here in this hand. This is Joe Hill's 20th Century Ghosts. I know this is not standard fare for the wizard, and yet recently I was in a bit of a fantasy burnout reading slump, and I was reaching for anything that I could come across to snap me out of it. And I happened to reach for a book that I just found at a half price books local used bookstore. And that's this one right here. And it absolutely blew me away. Now, I know Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King, and you're probably wondering, is this a horror collection? Yes and no. This is what I would consider closer to, say, Ray Bradbury's October Country, which I've kind of got right here on screen. It's on the spookier side, it's on the more melancholy side, but at the same time, it's not pure horror. It's not blood and gore. It's very well done. It's very intelligent. It's just poignant. Some of the stories in here are like absolutely ridiculous and shouldn't work, and yet, they do work. This collection moved me so incredibly deeply that this is already in the conversation for one of the best books that I will read in 2024. I loved this collection to the point where I had to immediately go out and get a special edition so that I can have 2 copies of this on my shelf, because it is so incredibly special to me very quickly. Now, we've got a number of stories in here. In fact, I'm not going to be able to remember them all, but you can kind of see right here, we've got a list of stories. Best New Horrors, 20th Century Ghosts, pop art. Very clever stuff. And what I think Joe Hill does very well is he is able to take these stories, and without diving into full-on horror, he can bring a sort of apprehension or a tone or a vibe to the story that by the end of it, you're just like, was that a horror story? Am I a little scared? Or was that a thriller? Was that fantasy? Was that melancholy? Like, it pulled so many deep emotions out of me that I was just left stunned by the end of it. I couldn't put it down. I rarely kind of talk about what I'm currently reading to people on social media or in DMs and stuff like that. I had to find people who had already read 20th Century Ghosts, and I had to talk to them about it. I heard a lot about the story in here called Pop Art. Pop Art is about a balloon boy. You heard me right. He's an inflatable person who is bullied, and he is treated just poorly, and you just kind of go through this friendship of this very narrow span of a young boy's life. And it shouldn't work. It's ridiculous, and yet it does work. We've got 20th Century Ghosts. It's about like the 1940s, and we're in this movie theater, and a young girl died years prior while watching The Wizard of Oz. And ever since then, she's been haunting the movie theater. And it's absolutely beautiful. What are some of my other favorites in here? I'm gonna use the list as a cheat sheet, guys, because I mean, there's just so many great stories in here. Best New Horror. I loved Best New Horror. That's the opening story in this book, because basically we've got this kind of down on his luck small-time magazine horror publisher, and he comes across this story that he was just like, oh, this is really disturbing. This is really good. And he goes to find this author, and shenanigans ensue. And not of the good kind. And yet, throughout those shenanigans, this individual seems to find themselves in the predicament that they found themselves in. It's fantastic. The Black Phone. We've got a child abduction story here with a little bit of a ghost story as well. Oh, I love it. In fact, one of the ones that was most poignant, I'm going to forget the name of it. It wasn't Deadwood. It was Voluntary Committal. It's one of the last stories in this edition of the bind-up. And I recently found out that in other bind-ups, there's like an additional Black Phone chapter, and there might be an additional story. So we'll see. This may get an amended short or something like that. But essentially, involuntary committal, we've got this young man who has been diagnosed with I believe it's schizophrenia, is what the story says it is. And basically, part of the way he copes is he builds mazes in his basement in cardboard boxes. But he's not the main character. We follow his brother, and his brother has got this kind of adolescent sort of attitude. He falls in with a person of ill repute, and basically his brother kind of comes up with a solution. And it's just kind of spooky. And I loved it. It was so incredibly good. I don't know, I don't know how many ways I can tell you to read Joe Hill's 20th Century Ghosts, because, you know, I'm not a typical horror reader, although I find myself starting to lean more heavily into the horror side of fiction. In fact, I may, for the foreseeable future, try and add a horror, air quotes, horror novel, something on the darker side, not grimdark, but horror, onto my monthly TBRs, just to kind of spice things up. I know my buddy Mike from Mike's Book Reviews is doing this as well. And after kind of hitting fantasy burnout, I think this is a good policy, because frankly, like, just based off of this, I had previously read Nosferatu by Joe Hill, and I really liked it, but I felt like the pop culture references in Nosferatu were going to date it. It's just like 2000s pop culture reference after pop culture reference, and it was a little heavy on those references. And so for that reason, like, I liked it, but I didn't love it. This felt timeless. This felt poignant. It felt beautifully written. Like, I just flowed through story after story after story. An actual page turner. I couldn't put it down. This is only about, by the way, 315 pages. I think in the last story being involuntary committal, or no, voluntary committal, coming in at like 35 pages is the longest story that you're going to find in here. And I don't know. This collection absolutely worked for me. And basically, I'm now going to buy all of Joe Hill's backlog. Like, I've got a good chunk of it already. I've already got Horns, I've got Heart-Shaped Box, and I've got The Fireman. I'll probably be rebuying a paperback of Nosferatu. I've got Strange Weather, I think is what it's called, on the way. I want Full Throttle. He's got some stuff supposedly coming out in 2025. I'm here for it. I am sold. I am on the Joe Hill train right now. I'm so excited to dive into this author's work, because frankly, like, this felt like it could have been a Ray Bradbury collection. I just felt immediately pulled in. There's just a timeless, sort of spooky, classical style of horror to this. This is not blood, gore, and jump scares. That's not what this is. This is the feeling of horror, the vibe of horror that you kind of find in the 70s and the 80s, or possibly even the 50s and the 60s. It's that kind of horror. It is not your typical just stabby, jump scare, monster of the week type of deal. This deals with the human condition, that kind of horror, and what we classically found to be scary, and what initially draws humans to the spookier side of things. I don't know. If it sounds like I'm talking nonsense, this is all just coming straight from the emotions that I feel this book elicited from me. It's great. It's a fast read. It's an easy read. I mean, we've got, I think, 14 stories. Can I count at all? I can't count. I'll cue you in right there. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I was off by 1. This one's amazing. Please do yourself a favor and check this one out, because I feel like it's flying under the radar. Yeah, it got some accolades back in the day, but it's still just as relevant today as it was back then. That's all I've really got for you today, guys. I love this one. If I have to give it a grade, it's going to be an A+. This was fantastic. It's going into my top 10 of the year. Do yourself a favor and check this one out. I hope you're doing well. Till next time, guys, peace out and stay magical. Bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons. Thank you for supporting my passion and my hobby. It means the world to me.